I don't know if you know this about me. If you know me at all, this might not be a surprise, but I tend to be just a touch absent-minded. I have a lot happening. I'm thinking about a lot of things all the time, and so it happens that I forget things or lose things. Details are not my strong point. Like, that's just not chief dreamer. Details, no, that's not me. So it plays out in a lot of ways. One way is if you need me to remember something, please, for the love, just text me. Like, that's going to go better. But it plays out in the ways that I lose things, because I lose things all the time. You know, like I put things down. If you find a cup of coffee around the church anywhere and no one's near it, it's mine. I just have set it there and wandered off. Or like bulletins, I take numerous bulletins every Sunday morning because I set them down and then wander away and forget where I put them. A couple weeks ago, I lost my wallet. Had no idea where it was. I mean, I looked high and low. I tore apart the house. I went back to the places I had been. I looked all over for this thing. I was coming to the point where it was gone, and I just had to accept that. And I thought, I'm going to take one more look around the house. And it was on top of the refrigerator, like in the back, under the I don't know how it got there, but there it was. I regularly lose my keys, and I'll say to Beth, like, have you seen my keys? Like, where are my keys? And she just rolls her eyes and says, I don't know where your keys are. This is a fair response because we have one of those key rack things by the door where if you come in, you just hang your keys up, and then when you leave, they're there, but mine are never there. I have recently found my keys in the refrigerator because that's a normal place to keep your keys. I remember one time, though, where this really hit home. We had just gotten our kids. Hunter was 3. We had them just for a few weeks, and we were going to visit my parents. So we'd gone out to their house, and I was becoming aware throughout the weekend that my keys were missing, and I figured they would just reappear because that's what happens. But they don't, and so we're getting ready to leave to go home, and I don't have my keys, and Beth doesn't have her keys, and so we're not going anywhere. So I start to look in all the places that I put my keys, like the refrigerator, and they're not anywhere. You know, they're nowhere. So finally I say, does anybody know where my keys are? And Hunter, he wasn't talking at this point, which is somewhat hard to believe now, but he wasn't talking at this point. And he looked at me and he went and he got them out of the back of the coat closet. Like they were all the way back in the back on the floor. And I said, did you take my keys? And he nodded, you know. And so for a while there, anytime I would be missing my keys, I would say, Hunter, do you know where my keys are? And most times he would. He would just go find them and bring them back to me. I like the story we read this morning because it tells the story of something that is lost being found, and those moments in life where we're searching for something. Have you ever lost something and you decide you need to find it? Maybe it's something that's very valuable and you need it back. Maybe it's nostalgic, but for whatever reason, you start to look, right? And you tear the house apart and you look under the bed and you look under the car seats and you look at work and sometimes you find it, but the ones that always stick with me are the things I don't find. The first year Beth and I were married, we lost one of our bowls, like one of our cereal bowls, in this tiny little apartment we lived in. I have no idea where it went. We looked all over the apartment, which was like 300 square feet. It wasn't there. When we moved out, we looked all over the apartment. It wasn't there. I think my landlord stole it. That is the only thing that makes sense. But I mean, it's 15 years ago, and I'm still like, I wonder what happened to that bowl, you know? We think about these things that we look for and we lose or we can't find time and time again. In the story today, Jesus tells of looking and searching and seeking and finding. The story starts with Jesus making the religious people mad, as Jesus is wont to do, right? This is throughout the book of Luke particularly. Jesus makes religious people upset. They get mad at him because he does not live up to the expectations that they have thought of for him, or he doesn't do the things that they would expect. And so they're upset with him because Jesus, they say, is eating with sinners and tax collectors. I don't know if they're jealous. Maybe they want more time with Jesus. Maybe they think it's scandalous that Jesus is eating with these folks. Maybe they think about those things that their parents always said to them in middle school. The company you keep determines the people you are, right? You know, the people you're around is going to influence who you are. But they're watching Jesus, and they're seeing that he is with these folks that he shouldn't be with, and they grumble about it. Grumble, 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 grumble. Maybe if we were rewriting this today, we would say that Jesus was upset because, or the people were upset, the religious people were upset because Jesus was eating with Marshall and Pitt fans. It is football season after all. Or maybe we would say that the religious people were upset because Jesus was eating with prostitutes and prisoners. Or maybe we would say that religious people were upset because Jesus was eating with addicts and homeless folks. Or maybe the religious people would be upset because Jesus was eating with people who were undocumented and ICE agents. You see, we can fill in the blanks, can't we? Because there are people that we somehow have decided maybe just sit outside of the grace of God. There are people that we think are in and out, and in the church we've worked really hard on in and out. And so we like to know who's in and we like to know who's out. And so it's easy to kind of look around and say, well, those folks haven't met the standard. Those folks sit on the outside, forgetting that the church exists for the people who are not here yet. I want to make sure you hear that because this is maybe the most important thing I say. The church exists for the people who are not here yet. We are one of the few organizations in the world that operates for people that don't actually sit in the pews. We're for the other. And if we lose sight of that, we lose sight of God's call. It's easy to grumble and grumble and grumble and think who's in and who's out, who's welcome and who's not, and to draw those lines, isn't it? And that's what's happened. The religious leaders and the religious people and the pastors and the priests have drawn these lines. And so they see Jesus stepping over the lines and they grumble at him. I kept wondering this week, what was it about Jesus that made sinners and tax collectors come to him? Like, what was it about the way that Jesus was that made sinners and tax collectors want to be with him? Because these are the people that have been shunned by the religious establishment and told they're not welcome and worthy. What is it about Jesus that brings those people out in force? I don't know if it's his winsome way. My guess is this. I think maybe Jesus was able to see something in them that they had not seen in themselves. That Jesus was able to see beyond the labels that the world had put on them, that Jesus was able to see beyond the things they had done or not done, that Jesus was able to see something intrinsic about who they were and love them no matter what they had done or not done. One of the incredible things about Jesus in Luke, and throughout Luke's gospel, Jesus meets with and talks to sinners and tax collectors all the time. He gets in trouble with it a bunch. He never once in Luke's gospel scolds people for their sinfulness. Read the whole thing. He never once scolds people for their sinfulness. He never once looks at them and says, you need to do this or do this, get your life right, make some changes. He welcomes and eats and sits and hears stories and learns names and builds relationships. And because of that, the sinners and tax collectors come. So the Pharisees see this and they grumble. Grumble, 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 grumble. And Jesus decides to tell some stories. And he says, which one of you, if you were a shepherd and had lost one sheep, wouldn't leave the other 99 to go find it? And I read that, and I'm like, I would not leave the other 99 to go find it. First of all, I probably wouldn't know that one is missing. I mean, think about that, right? You have 100 sheep. How are you going to count all those sheep? The sheep are they're not lining up for you. They're not the sort of sheep that have the numbers, right? They're there's just sheep. 1, 2, no, 1, 2. You couldn't count them, but somehow the shepherd notices that one sheep has wandered off. And in a reckless, outrageous, foolish move, the shepherd leaves the 99 to go searching for the one. Now, this is a crazy thing to do because in the Judean wilderness where they were, there are valleys and crags and holes and caves and briars and thistles. If you lose a sheep there, it's probably gone. Probably something has eaten it, it is not safe for the sheep. But somehow the shepherd says, I'm going to leave behind the whole group. I'm going to look for the one. There's something about this that calls the shepherd away from a place of safety and security to a place of danger and risk, to a place that is beyond safe, to a place that says, I'm going to search no matter what, because even if just one is missing, one is one too many. And we see this picture of God who looks at us and says, even if just one person is missing, one is one too many. We see this picture of God that puts God's self in danger and steps into our world, that accepts death and sin and comes to be among us so that no one gets left behind. What a beautiful picture of God that searches for us and looks for us and notices us. The shepherd finds the sheep and he picks it up and he puts it on his shoulders and he brings it home and he calls all his friends and he says, "Come, celebrate with me. I found it. In this miraculous moment, I found it." Or Jesus says, what about the woman who lost a coin and went looking for it? Now, when Jesus starts to tell this story, just so you understand how radical Jesus is, when Jesus compares God to a woman, people's heads are blown, right? Their minds are just like shaking, but this is what Jesus does. Jesus says, God is like a woman who has lost a coin and decides to go find it. And looks and searches high and low. And there's some scholars who think that maybe if the woman had 10 coins and she lost one, she was poor. There's some scholars that think she has a place to live. She's got a house. 10 coins, she's living a pretty good life. She maybe doesn't need that. I don't know. I don't know whether the woman is supposed to be rich or poor, but here's what I know. She goes to look for this coin. She lights a lamp. She begins to sweep. She gets down in all the dirty parts of your house that you don't want to go to. She's dealing with the dust bunnies under the bed and the dirt under the stairs. She's working around the toilet. She's looking under the sinks. She's looking for this coin. And when she finds it, she throws a party. She says, I found it. I found the thing I've been looking for. I found the coin, right? Could you imagine if somebody called you and was like, hey, I found $5. Come over for a party. You know, like, we're going to celebrate. I have found $5. By the way, this is helpful advice. If you're ever telling a bad story and you realize part of the way through you're telling a bad story, just end it with, and then I found $5. And people go, oh, good, yeah, that's great. It's really helpful storytelling advice for Matt. But that's what the woman does, right? She says, I found it. I found the money. Come celebrate with me. What a beautiful picture of God who gets God's fingers dirty, you know, who enters the dirt and the grime looking for the coin. The coin that didn't wander off, the coin that cannot offer repentance, the coin that doesn't even realize it's lost. But God does. What a beautiful picture of God who doesn't make us repent, but who is seeking us and searching for us. What a beautiful picture of God, the hound of heaven who was on our tail, relentless and reckless, searching high and low, making sure that nobody gets left behind. What a beautiful picture of God who has not forgotten us or left us, but seeks us and searches us, not because we have earned it, not because we deserve it, not because we've done anything to make it happen, but because we have been sought. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. And it's beautiful because it reminds us that we were once people who were lost and we've been found, haven't we? We were once like the coin that got set aside. We were once like the sheep that have wandered away. And if you read on, we were once like the prodigal who made a choice, a deliberate choice to do their own thing. And even in the midst of that, even in the midst of our disobedience, even in the midst of our carelessness, even in the midst of our forgetfulness, God has not forgotten us. It's important for us in the church to remember that we who once were lost have been found, because we need to remember that we've been lost. I sometimes worry in the church that we get here and we get in the pews and we get around the people that we know and see and we think, I made it. And we begin to see others as those and forget that we too once were lost. I'm afraid that sometimes we pass judgment rather than offer grace. The story levels the playing field. We were all lost. And by God's grace, not our own works, not our own might, not our own goodness, by God's grace we have been found. To proclaim the story that says, I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. It levels the playing field and reminds us who we are. But more than that, this story of the lost and the found, the story of a God who searches, invites us to search too. It invites us to be people that seek. It invites us to be people that keep our eyes open, because if God is searching, if God is seeking, if God is looking for the lost and the lonely, then so should we. If God will not quit looking for those who are far away, then neither should we. If God realizes that the community is not complete until all are welcome, then so should we. That's what the story tells us. The community is not complete until all are welcome. We are not the people that God has called us to be until all are invited. We are not the people that God has invited us and nudged us and dreams for us to be until all get to come home. And so we are people who seek and search and look. We are people who offer grace and mercy. We are people that know what it means to care for our neighbors and those who are hurting. We are people who know what it means to cheer for the underdog and root for the hurting. We are people who know what it means to offer grace in powerful ways. That's who we are, church. We join in God's searching, seeking work to offer hope to a world that needs to know it. Who will you seek? Not because you've done it, because God's already doing it. God's the one who's already doing the seeking. But who's God asking you to join with God in seeking? A friend, a neighbor, a coworker? Who is it that you will seek? Here's what I want you to do. Because I don't want this to be some icky kind of evangelism where we're just trying to save souls. That doesn't feel right to me, and I don't think that's what God has. I think there's something deeper and more powerful in relationship and community that we should be about. I think of the acronym BELLS, B-E-L-L-S, okay? The B stands for bless. Who will you bless? Who will you encourage? Who will you care for? The E stands for eat. Who will you eat with? If you read through Luke, Jesus eats with a lot of folks. Jesus likes to have meals. Who will you eat with that's different than you? Who you eat with that shares a different perspective than you? Who will you eat with, share a cup of coffee with, share a meal with? Then maybe someone God is seeking. Listen. Hear the story. Learn who they are. Learn. Understand the needs that they bring, the places that they come from, and serve. Bless, eat, listen, learn, serve. Bless, eat, listen, learn, serve. So we can join God in the work God is doing. And then when they come home, throw a party. I love the fact that what Jesus, as he tells these parables, says, when they come back, they throw a party. Celebrate and rejoice in the good work that God has done. Friends, we once were lost, but God has sought us because that is who God is. May we join God in seeking and searching and looking for the other.